Chapter 13. The Eye of the Hurricane. Kat called out to us from the kitchen that we were wanted back in the living room. When we got there, Aunt Gloria had finished her brandy and was staring at the bottom of the glass, and her lips were turned down, which meant she was sad, and her eyebrows were hunched together, which meant she was also cross. Inspector Pierce rose to her feet and promised to let us know if there was any news. Then she said there was one last thing. Did Aunt Gloria have a photograph of Celine? Aunt Gloria took a credit card holder out of her handbag. "I've only got this," she said. "It's a bit old. The rest are in the photo albums. They're on their way to New York by sea freight." She handed the picture over. "Your son is 13, you say?" Aunt Gloria nodded. 14 in July. "How old is he in this?" 8, said Aunt Gloria. The inspector said the police would need something more up-to-date. Aunt Gloria said, "You can get something from his father when you contact him." I remembered Salim's father only barely. He was an Indian man called Rashid, and he worked as a doctor. Aunt Gloria and he had divorced years ago. "Shouldn't you call Rashid, Glo?" Mum said. "You never know. Salim might have gone there. It's possible." Aunt Gloria shook her head. "Salim would never do that. Besides, Rashid and I are not on speaking terms. Salim goes over there every other weekend, and that's it." Inspector Pierce examined a knuckle on her hand as if there was something wrong with it, but I could see no cuts or bruises. "And what did he think, your former husband," she said, "about Salim and you going to New York?" Aunt Gloria didn't reply. "He must have said something about it." "Not a lot. I said he could have Salim for 2 weeks at Christmas and in the summer. That seemed fine by him." There was another silence. "Who knows?" Aunt Gloria added. "Maybe he does have something to do with this. That's what you're driving at, isn't it?" Inspector Pierce tucked the snapshot into her pocket and didn't answer Aunt Gloria's question. "This and your description will do for now." She stood up. "This is my card with my direct phone number. I'll leave it here on the mantelpiece. If Salim comes home or gets in touch, or if you have any further thoughts, call me." Aunt Gloria shrugged and said nothing, but Dad said we would. Then he showed her and the other policeman to the front door, and they left. I watched from the window as they got into a white and blue police car and drove away. Mum asked Kat to help her prepare some sandwiches. Aunt Gloria had another brandy. Dad came back and opened a bottle of wine. That made it just like Christmas evening, except it was getting late and it was still light outside and nobody was telling jokes or acting jolly. "Do you mind if I smoke?" said Aunt Gloria. Nobody answered. She took the silence as permission and lit up a cigarette and sat puffing in silence, even after Kat put a plate with cheese and lettuce sandwiches on her lap. She stared into space, inhaling and exhaling. Apart from her arm traveling with a cigarette holder up to her lips on average every 12 seconds, she was still. It was a strange silence. I realized that ever since Aunt Gloria had arrived in our house, she'd hardly stopped talking or moving. "Well," said Mum, after everybody had munched what they could of their sandwiches. Me 2, Dad 2, Mum 1, Kat a half, Aunt Gloria none. "Well," said Dad. I almost expected him to say, "Another fine mess" again, but he didn't. "How was work today, Ben?" Mum said. It was a question she asked him every day. "Work?" Dad said. He shrugged. "Okay, the barracks is empty now and all locked up. The concrete crushers go in on Thursday. I've a new job on now, down Peckham Way." "Peckham Way?" said Mum. She didn't look that interested. Her eyes stared off into space. "Peckham Rye." There was another long silence. Kat kept winding a strand of hair around her little finger and then unwinding it. I wanted to ask her what she was trying to achieve, but she saw me looking at her and scrunched up her face, so instead I said, "About Salim." Everyone started. "I've some interesting theories which might—" "Hush, love," Mum said. "This isn't the time for your theories." A deep silence fell on the living room after that. I heard the whir of the central heating. A kitchen tap dripped. Dad jangled some change in his pocket. I wondered what the silence was in weather terms. It was hardly the calm after the storm. Perhaps it was a calm in the center of the storm, the eye of the hurricane. I imagined a whirlwind, dark and swift, and in the middle of it a gentle oval-shaped stillness, shaped like a bicycle wheel seen from an angle, the London Eye. Mum shuffled her feet. The central heating stopped whirring. Mum said it was time to go to bed. "It's only 9 o'clock, Kat protested. "Anyway, I'm here on the couch, remember?" "That's enough, Kat." Mum got up and walked over to the window and looked out. She drew the curtains. "This once you can sleep in Ted's room on the Lilo where Salim—" She didn't finish her sentence, but we all did in our heads. "Where Salim slept last night." Aunt Gloria gave a low moan and leaned over her drink as if she felt ill. We were all thinking the same thought. Where in this big, dark, dangerous city was Salim going to sleep tonight? Chapter 14. 8 Theories. I lay on my bed that night trying to ignore the shuffling coming from less than a meter away. I could smell shampoo and hear breathing that reminded me of a restless panther. It was Kat on the Lilo where Salim had been the night before. The city noises came through the open window. Lorries pounded down the main road. Aircraft droned overhead. I imagined a great anvil-shaped cloud forming over southeast London and hot air rising in convection currents. There was an instability in the upper atmosphere. I often don't sleep at night. My brain is filled with all the strange facts about the world. I switch on my reading lamp and listen to the shipping forecasts on the radio on low volume. I get out my weather books. I study the charts of isobars and isotherms. I examine photographs of what the weather leaves behind. Dried up lakes, wrecked shantytowns, mudslides, people rowing boats around the roofs of their houses. And I plan how, when I grow up, I will help people prepare for disasters and save their lives and their money and advise governments on how to manage the weather. But tonight I couldn't switch on the light because of Kat. I think the molecules in my brain went haywire because all I could think of were dodos chasing Lord Lucan, who was sailing away in the Mary Celeste towards an evening sky with a giant bicycle wheel for a moon. I saw Salim waving from the deck, just as he'd waved the last time before boarding his pod. I heard Aunt Gloria's voice saying it was me that had suggested going to the London Eye when it hadn't been. I saw Mum's hand flicking me away like a fly. "Ted?" Kat was awake. "Ted?" "What?" "Are you awake?" "Yes." "So am I." She sat upright, and I saw her arm reach over for the bedside light. She switched it on, and we blinked at each other. "It's no good. We've got to talk about it." She sat with her hands clasped around her knees and her head on her kneecaps. Her strands of brown hair flopped untidily over her shoulders. I said. "Yourself," she said. It took me a moment to realize she was imitating me. She smiled. "Maybe if I sound like you, I'll think like you, Ted." "I don't think thinking like me is any better than thinking like you," I said. We listened to my alarm clock ticking. "Ted, what strikes you as the oddest thing about Salim's disappearance?" "The fact that he disappeared from a sealed pod," I said. Kat nodded. "He went up the eye and didn't come down." "Definitely odd," I said. "And nobody else, not the police, not Mum or Dad, not Auntie Glo, seemed to realize how odd. They all ignore what we keep telling them and make out how we just weren't paying attention and missed him somehow. But that's not possible, is it?" "Possible, yes. Probable, no," I said. "We saw 2 capsules empty out before his came down, and several after. I timed how long he was up with my watch. There is only a small margin of error possible." "So what happened? Where did he get to?" "I have 8 different theories," I said. Kat was impressed. 8 different theories?" 8. One of them must be correct, unless there's one or more theories I'm missing." "What if I write them down?" Kat grabbed a piece of paper from my desk and I dictated to her the following list. This is what Kat wrote down with her own comment after each theory saying how likely she thought it. 1. Salim hid in the pod. Under the seat, maybe. And went round 3 or more times getting out when we'd given up looking. Just possible. Worth checking out. 2. Ted's watch went wrong. Salim got out of his pod when we weren't there to meet him. Unlikely. Just check Ted's watch, 23:43. His alarm clock says the same. It's keeping perfect time. Ted says he checked it 5 times against Big Ben while we were out today. 3. Salim got out of his pod, but we missed him somehow by accident, and he didn't see us either. What parents police think? But we think only a 2% chance. We both kept a lookout on everybody that came out, and there were never many people at once. Salim would have had to miss us too, unless. 4. Salim either deliberately avoided us or was suffering from amnesia, memory loss. This theory means he must either have wanted to run away or was perhaps knocked on the head and somehow forgot about us. But we were standing there, looking at everybody as they came off, and we still don't know how we'd have missed him even if he didn't want us to see him, or forgot what we looked like, so really as unlikely as 3. 5. Salim spontaneously combusted. I've never heard of this, but Ted seems to think people sometimes vanish into a puff of smoke. He says it's a rare but documented phenomenon and works like local thunderstorms. Not likely. Hardly counts. 6. Salim emerged from the pod in disguise. Possible. But going by the other people who got out of the pod, the Japanese tourists, women, tiny children, etc., highly improbable. The person who looked most like Salim was the boyfriend of the girl in the pink jacket, but he was plumper, with a much fuller face. Definitely not Salim. Anyway, how would he have changed clothes without anybody in the tiny pod noticing? 7. Salim went into a time warp. He could be stranded in another time or even a parallel universe. Probability factor 0, as with theory 5. 8. Salim emerged from the pod hiding beneath someone else's clothes. When we got to this last theory, Kat looked at me over the top of her pen. She didn't even bother writing down her comment. You remember how Laurel and Hardy almost get out of the Foreign Legion camp in the Flying Deuces? I said. It's the film we watch with Dad every Christmas. Ollie, the fat one, is heartbroken because the girl he loves doesn't love him and he wants to forget her. And a man tells him that if he joins the Foreign Legion, he will forget her. So he joins the Foreign Legion and Stan, the thin one, joins too. But the Foreign Legion is not very nice. They have to wash an endless mountain of clothes, which would take the rest of their lives to do, so they decide to escape. Don't you remember? I said. They hide in the robes of these Arab men as they're walking towards the gates. I remember, Kat said. And that's the daftest of the lot. But you remember those African women? I said. They had long flowing robes, and there was a big man with a long raincoat. Okay. She rolled her eyes so that I could only see the whites. She then wrote down after theory 8. Can Ted hide in my clothes without Mum noticing? I don't think so, but we can try. Kat looked over the list. They're not very promising. Are you sure there aren't any better theories? Otherwise, we're just going to have to accept that the police and all are right. I thought hard. Then I had what people call an inspiration. An inspiration is an idea that seems to come from nowhere. In the olden days, people thought inspiration came from the gods or God, depending on if you were a polytheist or a monotheist, breathing an idea into your brain. There is a 9th theory, I said, my hand flapping. Not something weird like aliens beaming Salim up to their spaceship, or him slipping between dimensions, or... No, not weird, I said. In fact, I think it's the best theory of all. But before I could say what it was, the phone rang. Chapter 15. Infinity. By the second ring, we dashed to the door. Kat pushed past me, elbowing me in the stomach. By the third ring, we were on the landing. We heard Dad answering on the extension in his and Mum's bedroom. We didn't dare go in, but we listened. But Dad's voice is soft, and I could hear nothing. Then Aunt Gloria staggered out of Kat's room in a silky pale blue nightdress. Her eyes were wide open, and her hair was messy. "Salim?" she whispered. Her teeth chattered as if she was cold, although the temperature that night was not due to drop below 15 degrees. She flung open Mum and Dad's bedroom door just as Dad hung up. "Salim?" she repeated. "No," Dad said. "It wasn't Salim. It was the police." "They found him? Please say they found him." "They're not sure." Kat was holding my arm and squeezing it hard. Her mouth was round like an O, a very big O. She was staring at Dad's face, and something she saw there had made her startled. So I looked at Dad too. I could see strange movements going across his lips and eyebrows. There were small globules of sweat on his forehead. It was not an expression I'd ever seen on him before. "What do you mean they're not sure? They've either found him or they haven't," Aunt Gloria said. Her voice had a strange wobble in it that made a pumping start in my ears. It's like this," Dad said. "They found someone not far from the London Eye, near the river, a young Asian boy." That's it, I thought, remembering theory number 4. They found somebody who's lost his memory and doesn't know who he is anymore. He's been wandering around all day without knowing where to go. "That must be him," Aunt Gloria said. "Why didn't they bring him right here?" "They couldn't," Dad was saying. "Because, you see, this boy, whoever he is, he could be anyone at all. This boy is..." I was waiting for him to say he'd lost his memory, or maybe that the blow to his head had landed him in hospital, so it was not safe yet to move him. I didn't expect what came next. "He's in the morgue." I won't say much about what happened next. Aunt Gloria was sick on the carpet. Mum leapt out of bed. She sobbed and hugged Aunt Gloria, saying it couldn't possibly be Salim, while Dad started throwing outdoor clothes on over his pajamas, and Kat stood there gripping me. I turned to the door and started thumping it. Dad put a hand on my arm, and the next thing I knew the police had arrived and taken Dad away to look at this young Asian boy in the morgue who might or might not be Salim. Aunt Gloria was too ill to go. She lay on the sofa, covered over in a blanket, saying, "Salim, Salim, don't let it be you on that cold slab. Salim, Salim." Her teeth chattered and Mum sat on the arm of the sofa stroking her hair. Then Kat did something brave. She made a pot of tea, even though her hands were shaking. That's Kat. Horrible about small problems, like missing a bus or being 10 pence short for a CD she wants, but good about big problems, like when Mum had a big operation the year before. She made us frozen dinners and asked Dad how his day at work had been while we ate them. Then when Mum got home, she ran up and down the stairs with cups of tea, flowers and magazines, and Mum said she didn't know how she'd have coped without her. The others had tea in the living room waiting for Dad's return, and Mum had to bring the mug up to Aunt Gloria's lips to get her to drink, as if she was a baby. I brought my tea back upstairs to my room. On the desk, I found the list of theories and the souvenir photo that Kat had bought at the wheel. I stared at them without seeing them. Dover White Portland, I thought. Northwest 6 to gale 8, becoming cyclonic. 54 minutes went by between when Dad went out the door with the police and when he came back. That's 3,240 seconds. I read somewhere that as you get older, your brain speeds up. You think time goes by faster. So perhaps I felt the 3,240 seconds the longest. But Kat said later that she was sure Aunt Gloria must have found them longer than me. She said the more agony you feel, the more time slows down. And Aunt Gloria must have been in more agony than anyone else because it was her son that might or might not be lying on that cold slab. A young Asian boy, Salim or not Salim. Something terrible happened during those 54 minutes. No amount of making up shipping forecasts could stop me from thinking about it. Death. I realized it was real. I would die one day. Kat would die. Mum would die. Dad would die. Aunt Gloria would die. Mr. Shepherd at school would die. Every living thing on the planet would die. It was not a question of if, but when. Of course, I'd known about death before, but during those 54 minutes, I really knew it. That's when I realized that there are two kinds of knowledge, shallow and deep. You can know something in theory, but not know it in practice. You can know part of something, but not all of it. Knowledge can be like the skin on the surface of the water in a pond, or it can go all the way down to the mud. It can be the tiny tip of the iceberg or the whole 100%. I thought of the long chain of all the days of my life and wondered how far along that chain I'd already got. Was I still just starting, halfway along, or nearing the end? If it was Salim on the cold slab, did he know when he got up this morning that he'd reached the last link in the chain? I thought about God and immortal souls and eternity. I remembered how years ago, when Father Russell in our church taught me that God had made me, I asked him, "If God made me, who made God?" Father Russell had smiled and said I was a born theologian, but didn't answer my question. "Did another God make him?" I said. And in my mind's eye, I saw a chain of gods, each having made the last, going back to infinity. Father Russell had sat down beside me and said,
"There is only one God, Ted. One God who has always been there. He's outside of time. He is beyond our understanding. He is always with us."
I wondered now about this God who was beyond our understanding. I closed my eyes. I tried to imagine him. But no matter how hard I thought, all I could see were clouds of confusion in a vast and silent universe. And if I had still had my trampoline, I would have jumped extra hard and extra high. Dad came through the front door 3,240 seconds later. I went downstairs, a different Ted from the Ted that had gone up. I had stared death in the face. When I saw Dad, I knew that he too had stared death in the face. His eyes were looking far away into the same vast void. Mum, Aunt Gloria, and Kat threw themselves at him.
"No,"
he kept saying, drawing the three of them into an embrace.
"Don't worry. It wasn't Salim. It was somebody else, some other boy."
Then he looked over their heads at me, and I looked back at him, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. The someone else, the boy who wasn't Salim, the young Asian who was lying on the slab, if not Salim, who? There were shrieks, tears, laughs. There were countless thank gods. I knew it wasn't hymns. I told yous. I didn't say anything. Dad stood still among the confusion, shaking his head. Then he said in a quiet way,
"It was a boy. Some young boy of the street. Maybe a bit older than Salim, but smaller, brown and skinny. A bit of a mustache, just like Salim had when he arrived."
"Before we shaved it off," Kat said.
"And the same black jeans. A kind of lost innocence in his face. A boy who'd never had much in the first place, I'd say. There was dirt in his fingernails and bruises on his arm."
Dad shook himself as if he was waking up from a nightmare. "How did he die, Dad?" Kat said. He didn't answer.
"I need a drink, Faith," he said. "A scotch."
Kat took me by the arm. "Ted, let's go," she whispered. I heard Aunt Gloria crying again, quietly this time. Kat went back upstairs and I followed her, without saying anything. Kat curled up on the lie-low and I got into bed. The boy on the slab, a boy of the streets. I turned off the light and listened to Kat's breathing, which showed she was alive. Dirt in his fingernails, Salim or not Salim. The words went round in my head like a scary nursery rhyme, echoing into infinity. It was a long time before I went to sleep. Chapter 16. Cloud Cover. The next day I woke up early. I looked out of the window to find thick cloud covering London. Humidity had increased overnight. If I'd been the weatherman that morning, I would have said an area of low pressure was moving in from the west with closely packed isobars and a chance of thunder. Kat Kat was already up. She was sitting at my desk, arranging the list of theories on one side, the souvenir photos she had bought at the Eye, and Salim's camera on the other side. "These are the theories," she said. "And these are the clues. I've thought it out during the night, Ted. I have a plan." I know about Kat's plans. They always involve doing things Mum and Dad have told us not to. I shuffled up to her side. "A plan?" I said. "3 plans. First, we develop this film. The photographs may reveal another clue. You never know." I nodded. This seemed good. "Then we test theory number 8. I wasn't sure what this involved, but said nothing. "And then we take another ride on the Eye." I thought about this. Revisiting the place where Salim had disappeared was a good idea. In detective stories, when the sleuth revisits the scene of the crime, he nearly always finds a clue that has been overlooked by the ordinary police. But there was a problem. "Mum will never allow it," I said. "If she says no, we'll sneak out." "That would be wrong, Kat. Besides, we haven't got the money for the tickets." Kat reached for her leopard skin backpack. She took out some large notes and 3 one-pound coins. "Mum and Auntie Glo gave me this money yesterday, remember, for the 5 tickets. The souvenir photo was £7. This is what's left." "Shouldn't you give it back to Mum, Kat? Stealing is bad. It says so in the Bible." "Shut up, Ted. She hasn't asked for it. She's forgotten." I went. Kat shrugged. "Mum thinks it's my fault Salim went missing. Fine. I'll give her her money back, in my own time. It's a loan. I'm not stealing." She turned to the window, threw it open and leaned outside. She put Salim's camera to her eye and clicked 18 times. She took 18 photographs of our back garden with the washing on the line, and beyond that the shed. I did not think these would make very interesting shots. When she finished clicking, the film rewound itself. She examined the camera carefully. "Found it," she said. She pressed a button on the side, and the back of the camera jumped open. She shook out the roll of film. "That's plan A," she said. "Now plan B." She put on her long dressing gown over her nightdress and stood there with the back of her gown draped over her arm. "Come on," she said. I stared. "Don't you want to test your theory?" she said. She picked up the sheet with the 8 theories and read the last one out loud, about Salim hiding in somebody else's clothes. Now it came down to it. I didn't much like the idea of getting in under Kat's dressing gown. I said. She took me by the elbow and dragged me downstairs. In the hallway, she made me crouch down behind her and humped the back of the dressing gown over my shoulders. She made me put my hands around her waist and practice walking up and down. Then we walked into the kitchen. It reminded me of the time Dad had played the back half of a donkey in the school pantomime. I could hear but not see that Mum was washing up glasses from the night before. She must have looked round. "Hello, Kat," she said. Her voice had a sighing sound in it. "What on earth's Ted doing up the back of your dressing gown?" I got out and stood up, blinking. "Told you," said Kat. "Is this some kind of joke?" Mum said. "We were checking a theory of mine, Mum," I said, "about how Salim might have left the pod without us noticing. It is only one of 8. Mum looked at me, and she looked at Kat. A grimy glass was in her hand. It dropped back into the suds. She took off her rubber gloves. "Kat," she said, "can you finish this?" Her words were ordinary, but her face was a Siberian permafrost. Kat took over the washing up without saying a word. Mum went through to the living room and sat there very still. "Ted," she called. "I want to talk to you." I was in trouble. I didn't know why. I said, going through and standing before her. "Ted," she said. Her left hand stroked her forehead. "You and your theories. Salim's gone missing, Ted. It's not a game." "Not a game," I repeated. "I don't think you realize how serious it is." "Serious," I agreed. "Don't keep repeating what I say." "Don't grunt. I've told you about that before, remember?" Sorry. "And remember to look at me properly when I'm talking to you." I concentrated on making my eyes move so that instead of looking at Mum's shoulder, I was looking at her face. Her eyes were small, and her skin was white, and her lips were turned down. "Ted," she leaned over and touched my hand. "Just think for a minute. What if Auntie Glo had seen you? How would she have felt?" My hand started to shake. "But, Mum, we've got these theories, 8 of them, and—" "Ted, no." My head went off to one side. I checked out the swirls on the carpet. My hand flapped harder. Mum's usually the one to understand me in this house. She stuck up for me countless times when I try to explain my theories about weather systems or other remarkable phenomena of the universe, and Kat tells me to shut up. It's Mum who tells Kat not to be rude. But since Salim disappeared, it had been the other way round. Kat was listening, Mum wasn't. I could hear Kat in the kitchen. Plates and pans clattered. I did something I'd never done before. I didn't answer Mum. I didn't even go, I went back into the kitchen. I picked up a glass from the draining board and smashed it to the floor. Kat looked at me, eyes wide. "God, what next?" Mum wailed, coming through to the kitchen after me. "Our best crystal." "Sorry, Mum," Kat said. "It was my fault, not Ted's. It slipped." But Mum had seen it happen. We all looked at the glass on the floor, and I hummed, and my hand flapped, and I didn't stop it. And Mum didn't tell me to stop it. She looked on in silence while Kat got out the dustpan and brush and swept up the mess. Then she sat on a chair at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, and I knew I had made her sad, and I wanted to go back to my room. Then Dad came in. He was wearing jeans and an old shirt, which meant he thought it was the weekend, and he didn't have to go to work, although he did because it was Tuesday. He went up to the sink, shuffled Kat to one side, took the mug she had just washed up, turned the cold tap on, filled it, and gulped it down. He finished the water, filled the mug a second time, and gulped it down again. Kat nudged me and nodded her head. There were 2 wine bottles, and a half-empty brandy bottle, and a third empty whiskey bottle on the fridge. I remembered reading that alcohol, even though it is liquid, makes you thirsty. If you're marooned in a calm sea, with barrels of wine and no water, there are 2 things you shouldn't do. Drink the wine or drink the sea. Actually, there's a third thing you shouldn't drink. Maybe you can guess what. "So," Mum said, "someone's not going to work today." I looked around the room wondering whom she meant. Dad knocked back another glass. "Someone's already rung in sick. Feel rotten, Faye, really do. Where's Gloria?" "Still asleep." "Thank the Lord for small mercies." "Dad," Kat began. "Mum." She let out the suds, took the mug from Dad, rinsed it, and upended it on the draining board. "Ted and I," she said, "we were wondering, we'd like to go out today." Mum's lips pursed, and her eyes rolled. "After what happened yesterday, not to mention Ted's breaking the glass just now, it's out of the question. You're grounded, both of you." "But, no buts." Dad cleared his throat. He took Mum by the arm and led her into the living room. He closed the door behind him. I could hear them arguing in undertones. Kat leaned over and whispered, "Dad's on our side. I know it. He'll get Mum to let us go out. You wait and see." Kat was right. 45 minutes later, she and I were walking out of the house, along with Dad. Mum said goodbye in the hallway. Her arms darted out as I passed her, and she gave me a hug. The hug was very short because she knows I do not like hugs of any kind. I saw her face up close, and it was red and blotchy, which meant she had been crying and was unhappy still. "Have a good day, all of you," she said. Dad took his mobile phone in case of news. As we walked towards the tube station, Dad asked, "Where do you 2 want to go?" "The Science Museum," I said. Kat kicked my shin, a very rude thing to do. "Actually, I want to go to the shopping centre first, Dad," she said. "Not more CDs, Kat." "Oh no, I just have to nip into the chemist's." She held out her hand and wiggled her fingernails, which were painted silver, "for some nail polish remover." "Can't wait to see the back of that stuff," Dad said.
It makes you look like an alien in a B-movie.
While Kat was in the chemist's, Dad and I waited outside, and he told me what a B-movie was, and how films like Creature from the Black Lagoon or Cat Women of the Moon, which Dad has in his collection, were made on low budgets with poor quality props and actors, and were so bad that they were funny and had a cult following. I asked Dad what a cult following was. Dad said a cult following was a fan club of something that wasn't mainstream, which means something that only a certain number of people like. I was asking Dad how many fans it took to make something move from being side-stream to mainstream when Kat reappeared brandishing a plastic bottle of blue liquid.
Got your paint stripper?
Dad said to her. Yeah, thanks, Dad.
Where next?
Ted had an idea, didn't you? Yes, Kat, the Science Museum. Not that one, the idea before that one. Her little finger went round in a circle. She winked. Kat's behavior, from snapping 18 pictures of the garden shed to making me get under her dressing gown to darting off to buy a nail polish remover, was making my brain spin. Remember, Ted? Yes, the London Eye. Dad stopped walking. He folded his arms and looked at me, then at Kat.
So that's what this is about, he said. You two are on a trail, huh?
Kat did a hands-raised shoulder shrug. Then she grabbed Dad's arm. Dad, it won't do any harm. You never know. If we go back at the same time as we were there yesterday, he might even show up. He might not know his way back to our house, but anybody could find the eye again wherever they'd got to. We just wanted to have another look. Get in a pod, see what it's like. See things as Salim must have seen them. It was another one of those sentences that everybody finishes in their heads, not out loud. Kat's lips trembled. I once heard Mum say that Kat had Dad wrapped around her little finger. I'd no idea what Mum was talking about. I'd looked at Kat's little finger and imagined Dad going around it in miniature, stretched and pummeled into an odd-looking living ring. Dad drew Kat towards him and gave her a squeeze.
It's really hard, Kitten, I know,
he said. Kitten is what Dad called Kat when she was small. He looked up at the sky.
The eye it is. There's a lot of cloud, which is good and bad.
Why bad? Said Kat.
We won't see that far.
Why good? I said.
Because it won't be too crowded, Ted, which means we won't have long to queue. Let's go.